Games, board games. We might be talking about dexterity-based auctions, but we're not gonna shout. We have now found that there's really only four dexterity auction games, although Board Game Geek says that there are more. But I promised that I went through all of them last night because I guess my sleeping schedule isn't right. But we'll have a talk and a discussion once I finish singing this song. And I don't.
don't know how
I
to
ate some
finish.
spinach. Last night I ate some spinach. I did.
I was going to say, and I don't know how to finish. Anyway, okay. Hello, Bez.
But you can't try and finish with finish. You have to.
No,
have
okay, that's
words.
very true. Yes. Okay. So.
Hello. It is 10 a.m. UK time. Time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder. And as I mentioned, today we are examining dexterity auctions featuring Alan Paull. Thank you for joining me as always.
Hello. Hi. Good to see you.
It's been a bit longer than usual. I want to say it's been 4 weeks.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, it has. Yeah, that was my fault because I made the mistake of getting COVID. You know, which wasn't pleasant.
I mean, that's entirely your fault. Clearly, how dare you?
Let's just skip over that one rapidly.
But yeah, I think that for people who don't know what dexterity auctions are, it's basically an auction. We agreed that auctions are where you've got some form of currency, and that might even be cards in hand. It might be other resources, but you're bidding, which means that you're taking turns to
throwing cubes at things.
Yeah,
yes,
basically, you're able to bid more or less for one particular thing, and the person who bids the most will get it in some manner. And we've talked about a brief discussion of what all the different things are, but the interesting thing here is that the process of bidding, it's not just verbalizing it, it's actually slamming your hands on a counter or throwing things into a cup or even throwing discs.
Yes, amazing. Not to be confused with just dexterity games. So there are lots of dexterity games where you. I was thinking beer and pretzels is a classic 2009 game, but there you're throwing things. You're throwing discs, coasters actually, onto something in order to score. Now you could make that into an auction game if a high score was a bid that enabled you to get something else. But in beer and pretzels, you're literally just scoring the points. So,
and I mean, there's a lot of things that are close to auctions, and it's like, okay, but it's not an auction. And but fundamentally, before we get into it, right now, what are your thoughts on dexterity auctions? Are they something that appeals to you? Are they something that excites you? How are you feeling right now?
I think dexterity auctions probably they have their place. I think they're more. I was going to say they're more party game-ish. Although actually, the only one I actually know isn't a party game, but they feel more like a party game idea. But probably
I agree. Like as soon as you bring in a speed element or a dexterity element, it feels more kind of party game-ish, and it's definitely taking a step away from just being a pure mathematical. Okay, if I do this, I've got to do that, and this gives me my opponents this opportunity, and it's all about that forward planning. There's a bit more at play there.
Yeah, I think the auctions in auction dexterity games probably tend to be simpler. I don't know. You don't want to, if people are having to concentrate on the dexterity aspect, you don't want people to have to be thinking too hard about it either. Probably.
But
possibly. I don't know.
I feel like that's enough of an intro.
I think so. Yeah.
Let's very quickly talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. Yesterday I got a few things done, and one thing I want to actually mention is that I spent about 10 minutes seeing if an AI could make a game.
So, right.
Because someone said, can a chatbot make a game? And they had some results, but then they never actually asked the chatbot for the rules. Like, so it kind of gave a vague overview. It was like someone saying, "Hey, here's an idea," and it's like, but it. So firstly, I asked it, "Please tell me some good ideas for a simple board game using 50 cards," and then it came up with these six ideas, which were not good. They were mediocre at best, or existing ideas.
Yes, it's interesting because I think with the AI, it'll
Let
yes,
me
that will try
finish
to
this story.
yes,
So
go for it.
then I changed the question to say simple, but also novel and interesting and ingenious. So then it said, okay, word card game. You've got to create words from the cards you have in your hands to win. That could be good, but I don't know any of the rules. Matching the number of your cards with numbers on the board. Okay, yeah, that sounds. Making a jigsaw basically. Match the pictures on their cards with pictures on the board. Trivia. Well, what's going to make that interesting?
Yes.
So yeah, please suggest some tweaks to the typical trivia game. How can you make it more interesting?
Oh, right. Okay, now you're getting there. Now this could be interesting.
So have teams. Bonus points for answering questions quickly.
Well, yes.
Rounds and then, but a round where teams can wager points on questions they are unsure of. And I'm like, okay, does that work like quits and wagers? What's going on here? How would it work? Please give clear instructions. So then it goes on to say that basically here's a bunch of ideas and you do wagers. It's just a series of instructions saying, hey, here's our teams, wager your points, and if you get it correct, you keep it. If you answer it incorrectly, you lose it. I mean, this is obviously completely wrong, because if you're only keeping it at best, you might as well wager nothing. So, that's not quite totally on the screen. So, ignoring that and assuming that it meant you get at double, because, okay, so can you add any catch-up mechanism?
Right,
because the first problem is that was wrongly written, presumably. I'll give it the benefits of the doubt. Okay, give bonus points to have more points in the end. Anyway, it said
this is hard work, isn't it?
Option 4, let teams re-answer a question for double the points if they answer it correctly. Well, why wouldn't a team that knows the answer just answer wrongly the first time on purpose? How can you avoid that potential issue? And then it kind of annoyed me, at which point I said, you are rubbish. And then it filled out the rest of the green thing, which was very impressive. You are rubbish at making up board games. Please suggest some resources that can help me. Is what it decided I really meant to say.
Oh, I see.
So now it sends me to Board Game Geek, which is actually a fairly decent resource.
Yes.
Game design resources, Board Game Design Lab, Board Game Designer Forum, Card and Board Game Designers and Publishers, and
Gamasutra. Yeah, so those are all very good resources. Yes.
Finally, it's like, okay, you need to do the work yourself. So what I've decided is that, yes, I wasn't expecting much, but that entertained me for about 15
and
minutes.
you got not very much. But to be fair, the ChatGPT, it does specify it's an information giving AI. It's not. I'm not sure how creative it can possibly be. I mean, I must admit, I did try it out yesterday as well. I did some tank questions, because World War II tanks, and if you ask it some fairly good ones, like I mean, for example, I said to the chatbot, what's the best tank in World War II, and it gave a very good coherent answer which addressed the problems with that question. It was a spot on answer, and I'm surprised at how quickly it does it. I'm not quite sure what the how it gets things to
someone
sort it
showed
out together.
me the
really
answer of what are the best games that he puts into different things, and one of them just said, "Here are the best games, top 11." These are the best games.
See.
And whereas Chat GBT actually came up with, "Hey, here's some reasons why you might not want to decide that. Ultimately, it depends on your group and the people you're playing with," which is 100% correct.
It's quite analytical in that sense. I think it's got some form of real good groundwork analysis. But then I went on and asked a very much more detailed, specific question, and it couldn't cope with it. But, so it obviously it's going to have have limits. If it's being asked to do a specific point of judgment, and it's a fairly tightly worded, really specific question. I mean, well, the one I asked was, what are the operational differences between a Tiger tank and a Sherman tank? How would you use them operationally, and what differences are there between them? That's quite a difficult.
Were you testing it, or were you
I was
wanting to
testing
know?
it. No, I was testing it.
Okay.
And it wasn't really able to give a coherent answer because it has to pass. What do I mean by operational use? What do I mean by Tiger tank, and how they use? So it didn't really give a coherent answer in terms of
Yeah, I
comparison.
saw a professor saying, "Hey, if I had this, I wouldn't have needed to go to university." But I think it's a very long way away from that.
I'm wondering if as you did, you were building up the detail. I wonder if that's a good approach where you can you put in successive questions. I think that's probably good. I don't know if that improves the end point. So if you've got a fairly tightly constrained area of information or judgment about board games you want to address, like can it be creative? If you're trying to approach that, can you approach it with some carefully worded questions that will coax it to be a bit more creative? And I don't know.
But this is not just about AI, but
no.
I think you wanted to share something. Can I share your screen?
Yes. Yes, please. Yes. This is some of the artwork that we are
So this is actually the first stage. So I saw this just a few minutes before.
Yeah.
And so this is for the thing that used to be called, "Yo dog, I heard you like moving gnomes. So move a gnome to move a gnome to move a gnome to maybe remove a tile." And
Yes.
I always have to count off how many gnomes you move on my fingers while I'm saying that title.
Yeah, this is one of the gnomes. Obviously, it's not a gnome because we've changed the thing. This game is currently called Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom, and actually there is another picture. If I share that, this is the bones of the game. Oh yeah, you haven't seen this, have you? I don't think.
No, this is a photo of Charlie's kind of prototype parts work going on.
Yeah. So basically, the way this works is
a quick hello to Yoda.
Hi, yeah.
Lovely to see you. And hello, Joseph. Lovely to see you too.
The way this works, very simply, in a quick sentence or two, is you move the right hand guy clockwise round the arrows 1, 2, or 3 spaces. Where it lands, that arrow indicates where the middle guy, who's currently in one of the middle squares, that's the direction that middle guy goes. So he will go, in this case, if you move 3, 1, 2, 3, he'll go down to the right.
Just one step.
Just one step. Always just one step. And then where he lands, the number of images on there, in that case 1, is the number of tiles that the third guy on the left will move round the Circle of Doom. Okay? So, clockwise. Yeah. So where he lands, where that third guy lands, who is called the gunner, and that's the image you saw earlier, you try to match that image with the image of the vehicle in the middle landscape tile section. If those images match, those bug-eyed monster images match, then the gunner has shot or captured, depending on the scenario, that particular bug-eyed monster, and that's removed. And the idea is,
sorry, I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, the idea is that at the top of the screen there, you can see there's 2 face-down tiles. Those have been selected by the players, and those have got an image of a bug-eyed monster on it. And your purpose in the game, your aim, is to have the last bug-eyed monster standing in the Circle of Doom. So
because you're trying to survive this horrible onslaught of humans who've come to invade.
Yeah. So that's the basic structure of the.
And it's a 2-player. So far, it's perfect information, but there are also 3 cards that you get in your hand in the standards game that you're kind of using and checking out what's going on here. And this is going to be the gunner, the one at the end. So you've got the navigator, the driver, and the gunner.
Some early sketches of a navigator, a gunner, a driver. The driver, he or she will be in a vehicle.
So you really went for like an 80s kind of punk vibe.
Yeah, kind of B movies, Starship Troopers, Mad Maxy type thing is what we're going for. Oh, this was some examples of the Navigator, and we're going for the bluey one. Let's go. Can I go back a
Number
bit
3.
more? Go back to here. This is just a collection of the 2 we've got at the moment with an idea of the background type of thing. That's not actually what the background will be like. That's just an example of how it might look eventually. So yeah, so we're working on that one. If I hadn't been doing my other recent highlight, which is basically checking Kingmaker rules, I'd have made a lot more progress with this particular game. But checking the Kingmaker rules has been my absolute total priority for several days now.
That is totally fair.
Yeah.
But
So that's good.
we have arranged that this is going to be, announced at some point properly. There will be some sort of crowdfunding, and fingers crossed it will be ready for Spiel.
Yes, indeed. That's the general idea. Yeah, it's
awesome.
It's really good.
Move on to the main topic.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's talk about brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant? I'm going to say that, talk about dexterity auctions just because they're a little bit weird, right? I mean, we've decided that there's only really 5 games on Board Game Geek, like up to 24 that have that tag. 4 of them are actually dexterity auctions. And I think that by having such a weird, unique mechanism, you really set your game apart.
Yeah,
and I just
definitely.
think that weird, unique mechanisms are brilliant. If you can combine like dexterity and auctions, I mean,
that is weird. Yeah, let's face it. That is pretty weird. Shall I read from the Bible that we're using? If you don't know about this, you probably should. It's Jeffrey Engelstein's and Isaac Shaleff's book, Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, and it covers, well, it's an encyclopedia of mechanisms or mechanics, if you want. Shall I just read how
Let's
the
go for
book defines this? Dexterity auction. A dexterity auction requires the performance of some act of dexterity to submit a valid bid. Typically, this would involve the bid marker itself being placed into some valid bidding area, but other methods for implementing this may be used. So fundamentally there, you are doing something, throwing a disc, throwing cubes into a cup, throwing things onto a board, typically seems to want to say, if you're trying to score more than your opponent, but in order to win an auction. And that's the key. You're not just trying to score and put your stuff in the right place on a board or in a cover. You're actually trying to outbid your opponent. And it's the dexterity that counts, which is nicely weird.
Now, Board Game Geek has used that exact same sentence. Obviously, Isaac Shalev and Jeffrey Engelstein gave their blessing for this to be used on Board Game Geek, and it was something that really redefined the way that mechanisms are on Board Game Geek. And going on is the typical, the one that's cited, but actually, having looked at everything, I'm going to get to Hibachi because I think that is the most dexterity auction-y of all the dexterity auctions. But we will get to that. Shall we? Would you like to say anything more about that definition, or shall we get to some examples?
I think the only thing I'd like to say at this point is that we will find it quite surprising how wide that can be. It feels. My instinctive reaction when you mentioned dexterity auctions was, oh, these are probably just party games. But actually, although there are a lot of party game type things in here, they're not all party games. That's hot one on the list there, Merchants of Amsterdam being...
I mean, remember, it is only 4 different things, basically.
But there are only 4. We've only got 4 games on Board Game Geek.
Even though it says 1 to 24, if I scroll down everything else, it's... Yeah, a speed game, a dexterity game. I mean, Little Tokyo, there's absolutely no auctions there. 100 astronauts, that was really weird because I looked up the Kickstarter page and it felt like some people just try to add all the mechanisms to their thing, and I removed a couple of others as well while I was at it. Because it's clearly not about aeroplanes, it's in space, come on. That's the problem with any wiki type site.
If you're self Self-proclaiming, yes. There's always a temptation to code things as much as you can, put as many possible things as you
To
can.
have all the tags.
Yes, because you theoretically get more searching. Now, I have to say, as a professional information manager and data person, I always found that really frustrating. You give people the freedom to code accurately, and they don't. They just code as much as possible, and it means that searching becomes much more difficult because you find, as we see here, lots of things get wrongly coded. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, let me look at this one firstly, which is
Babel O.
So this is uploaded by Masakazu Takizawa, who's the designer of the game.
Yes.
And it's a dexterity game. This is a lovely image. You can see like the backgrounds of the red, which I'm obviously biased to. You can see what's going on in the game. We're going to be stacking up bits. And fundamentally, this expansion means that you are doing an auction to determine who's doing the dexterity part.
Yes.
But they are two separate bits. I mean, the auction feeds into the dexterity aspect, which is interesting for sure, but it's not a dexterity auction. And I just wanted to highlight it to make...
You can have a game with dexterity and auctions, but if they're not linked, it's not an auction dexterity game.
Now, this is number one on the list, which is Merchants of Amsterdam by Reiner Knizia. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, now I have actually played this a long, long time ago, so I'm just going to focus on the auction bit. This is the kind of main example of a Dutch auction type game in the Geek, really. And it has got in the center there, it has got a proper clock. So it's actually got a piece of clockwork. And when you start the clock, it literally counts down, and the players will have their hands ready. And when it reaches a price, and it counts down from high to low. It's Dutch auction, so it's starting at a high level and going down to low. There we go. So when it reaches the level that you can afford or you want to go, you slap your hand on it. Well, nobody does it like that with a finger, but yeah, you slap your hand on it and it stops the auction at that point, and that's how much you pay. So here, you're trying to get it as cheaply as possible, but you do want to get it before somebody else gets it, and hopefully, will it show the? Is it going to just count down all the way to the end? I can't hear you.
This video was for someone to offer a replacement to someone who's lost their timer.
Oh, I see. Right, yeah. And so you win at the. You win if you are the person who can slap their hand down on it quickest for the price you want to pay.
As you can see in this little photo on the side of the box.
Indeed, yeah. To be fair, I can't remember the rest of the game, which is a bit of a shame. But it's that spring-driven auction clock, as it says in the blurb, that really is the heart of it.
I watched an overview, and like there's a lot going on in this game.
There is, yeah.
You've got the drawing free cards one at a time, kind of like BBBB845, where you have to say, okay, this card I'm going to keep for myself. This card I'm going to discard. And this card is going to go for auction.
But you
get to see the cards one at a time, and you have to make that decision. And that's kind of reminiscent of BBBB845, even though BBBB845 came later on. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the middle with how you place your cards and the tiles and all that. But fundamentally, there's stuff you want. And the dexterity comes in there because of the timing aspect. You have to slap your hand. And even though it's not a complicated dexterity thing, any speed game has a feeling of dexterity. And because speed auctions aren't really a thing, they're adjacent to dexterity auctions, I would say.
But it is a quintessential Dutch auction in that you are having to it's counting down, and you are picking when you want to put your bid in, which is and I can see being able to afford to produce that spring-driven clock makes it a kind of a lovely
Hmm.
game. And when was that? 2000. You see, 2001 was this game. 2001. So
Yeah, Rio Grande,
ancient
they've been
game.
going a
Yay.
while.
Oh yeah. And it's a lovely idea. And I remember enjoying this a lot when it came out. And sorry, 2000, not 2001. But I don't think we got a copy of this. We didn't buy it ourselves because Charlie doesn't like auction games. So we passed it by, which was a bit of a shame. But there we go. Merchants of Amsterdam. Rainer Knizia.
Now,
The actual, the master of auctions. So
oh yeah, Knizia is
not
amazing.
surprising.
And I think that recently, I'm going to say, when I say recently, I mean within the past 5 years. It was pre-pandemic. I played another Dutch auction style game, which was using an app, and the idea was that hey, we can do this on a phone. That's a really easy way to do it. Everyone's got a corner of the screen, and then you tap on your corner of the screen, and you can kind of play with auctions in a different way. And I think this is a really interesting idea, but I just mention it as something that designers might want to think about.
Yeah.
With modern technology, you could code something like this that basically, yeah, you could make something that looks really swanky, but it's not going to, frankly, only you could get by with a basic timer. I mean, you don't need much.
Yeah, but speed on online games is difficult because of
No, but
latency.
I mean on the mobile phone, in person, like just
in person on a mobile phone, you could. You certainly.
Yes, I mean just
absolutely.
using the mobile phone
Yeah.
as the thing to slap, because
Absolutely.
most people have a smartphone these days. I
Yep.
meant.
Yeah.
But then again, you do risk people. Yeah, moving ahead to 2011 is this game called it's. This is uploaded by Manuel. Thank you. Who shows it? Sorry, Safranito.
Safranito.
And this is the one that wasn't listed as a Dexterity auction game, but its successor was. But they're basically identical. I looked up the reviews, and the games seem literally identical except for graphical changes. So, but it was available.
How does this do the auction then?
Let me explain.
Yeah.
So it's also known as Hibachi, where instead of spices, you're chefs, and there's a bit of, cinema to what you're doing. So you have this board, you are literally throwing discs. You're not allowed to have your hand go over the board. You've got to stay outside the perimeter.
Yeah.
And now there's both an auction going on, and simultaneously there's a really fascinating dexterity economic model going on. So the 4 central gold bits that are there are actions that only one person at most will get to do. Each thing that you throw has a different value. I think they go from basically it's in a weird denomination, but basically it's from 1 to 10, but they're all in hundreds, something like that. So you throw it, and whoever's got the most value on one of those gold tiles gets to use it. So one of them might get you extra tiles, one of them might get you extra ingredients, one of them might get you chilies, whatever. And then on the outside is a separate bit where everyone who's thrown tiles onto the fish, for example, the total value of the tiles you throw onto the fish determines the selling price of the fish. So if you want to sell your fish, then throw lots of tiles onto it. But if you want to buy the fish, then throw your cheapest tile onto it, and you get the fish for whatever you personally put onto the fish, if that makes sense.
That's really clever.
And the same is true of all the ingredients. But from what I understand, the game doesn't really lean into this economic model as much as it could do, because money doesn't really matter. Money's just there to allow you to buy more ingredients, and it's just about finishing 3 recipes. And once you've done that, that's the end of the game. So
it's interesting because it sounds like a kind of combination of beer and pretzels and a la carte. Do you know a la carte, which is Karl-Heinz Schmiel's Karl-Heinz Schmiel's dexterity game, not auction dexterity, on cooking recipes. So here you've got the beer and pretzels throwing discs onto areas to claim the score or whatever, claim the area. And a la carte is all about completing recipes. So the dexterity bit in a la carte is you have to seize. You actually have in the game a proper kind of mini frying pan, and you have a cardboard recipe, which would be like these cardboard things on the table here, which goes in the pan, and you have to season the recipes because everybody knows you need to have your spices and your salt and pepper in your recipe.
Course.
So you have little pots with little wooden pellets in them, and you have to use the pot. You go tip into the frying pan, but you mustn't get 3 of the same type of condiment in, otherwise it's over seasoned and you can't complete the recipe. So if you can season it correctly without too much seasoning, then you make the recipe and you score that recipe. So it's not an auction, but it has got that dexterity aspect, and it's all about. And again, like this one, you win if you get 3-star recipes.
I mean, 3 is the magic number.
3 is the magic number, indeed.
It's like you've done it once, unless you are feeling. I mean, yeah, I'm actually now thinking, why did I choose Questable to do 4 words rather than just 3 words?
3 words, yeah.
Yes. Because in that game, I mean, maybe we should try it again with 3.
With 3.
Because
3 is the magic number, but
sometimes you do need to move slightly away from it. Sometimes 4 is correct.
Yes.
But
so
I find it really interesting how you are doing auctions for these actions. It's kind of almost like an auction dexterity worker placement system for the middle, but then your currency also doubles as the buying and selling price of the ingredients around the edges.
That is very clever. I like that. It's a 45-minute 2 to 4 player game, so very playable, I think.
And you can get an expansion for going 5 players, which I've heard is very good.
Designed by Marco Teubner.
Yes.
And published by Grail Games.
And I want to say thank you to Tia, who did this photo. I mean, you can see exactly what's going on in this photo. You've got the board.
Yeah, lovely.
It says that this is a 2-player game setup, but it's not really, because the discs are only going to be thrown once the game's already started. So this is really a mid-game 2-player game, I guess you could call it. But you've got that paper money on the side. You've got.
I'd love that. I'd buy this because it would go in our games library for some of our live action role play cons we go to. The players there would love this kind of thing because it's got. I was going to say party game elements. It's nice and simple and straightforward, and it's got a certain magic to the idea of. It'll have a lot of humor.
It feels like. I mean,
it'll be a bit of a laugh.
I've not played it, but it feels like the kind of thing that it's got enough going on that I could see myself definitely wanting to play a second time. Whereas there are some games that are a little bit more limited. I mean, Antoine Bowers has made some amazing games, but with Rooster Rush, made by Antoine and I can't remember the co-designer, but it feels like a one-note game. Once you've done it, like, that's it. But this is kind of party game plus family game.
Family game, yes, indeed. Yeah, that looks
here
really good.
Is the one that is by Scott Nicholson, Going, Gone.
Yes.
And this is the one that I was really aware of, although again I've never played it. You've got a picture by Kane at Spiel 2013 about when it came out. Plastic cups in the middle. There's Scott Nicholson posing with their game. Very happy to have it out finally. If you remember Scott Nicholson from Board Games with Scott.
Yes.
And each turn, this is literally the paddle. So you would hold it in your hand, and you would. One person would be the auctioneer, and you count down from 10 at any pace you want. So you can say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Right, yeah.
It must be a steady pace, as you can see at the top of the page.
Uh-huh.
So you can't say 10, 9, 8, 7.
Yeah, right, yes.
Right out.
You have to be fair to the players, yes.
Yeah. But as each time each of these cups is going to have 1 or 2 cards next to it. It's a very simple set collection game where there's countries, there's types of items, and there's all the permutations possible, if you know what I mean. And if you've got a lot of one thing, then you get a lot of points. So there's
Right.
American
Yeah.
comics, there's Japanese comics, and if you've got both of those, well, clearly you're going for comics, unless maybe next turn you get 2 Japanese things.
Yes.
On
Yes.
like then, oh, that's a set of 3. That's even
Mm.
better. So it's like a simple thing. It's not too difficult. It's easy, and it's only 10 seconds. You're chucking your cubes into those things. Your cubes are meant to last the entire 7 rounds. If you run out, you'll have to cash out some of your cards that you've already collected to get more currency, but then you're probably
Yeah.
not going to win
But is that
because it
what's the
goes up.
dexterity aspect? Other than, I mean, are you
The
having
dexterity
to?
aspect is popping
Yeah.
the cubes into the cups.
So
So
do you have to throw them from a range, or is there a
no,
restriction on how you do that?
well,
You just drop them in, or how do you do that?
by the rules of the game, you do just drop them in, and it just says drop their box.
Into the
Now,
cups.
Scott
Oh,
has talked about
yeah.
the box or the cubes.
Yeah.
Scott does say, yeah, you could do other things where you put it against the box back and you have to throw from a certain distance, and that's quite fun. And so you can easily house rule it.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And but as designed, it's basically again like Merchants of Amsterdam. It's more about that
Yes.
speed element.
Yes. Yes.
And right at the end, the auctioneer bangs down the paddle because it literally has a little handle and covers the things and says, "That's it. That's the end of the auction."
Right. So it's more it's speed, and you could optionally have some extra dexterity in terms of how you aim if you wanted to.
Yes,
If your
exactly.
group wants to do that, that sounds good. That sounds fun.
Which is exactly why I said that Hibachi
Yeah.
was the one with the most dexterity, because that's the
Yes.
one that forces dexterity upon you.
I think the great thing, I mean, I've been involved with the Cambridge and Ely playtest groups, and there's a couple of designers there who really like doing dexterity things. And although these games, once you've got them out there, these games look really nice and simple and straightforward. But actually getting to this point is really hard in terms of design. Getting the right amount of dexterity in there is a very fine line to get to. Because sometimes you can make things. I think there was a game we were doing where we were grabbing cubes from a box. Which is fine. Grabbing cubes from a box of the same, or not cubes, grabbing pieces from a box and you were trying to grab the same color and or the same shape, and getting the mechanism for how you grab things, or indeed later on and how you throw things. Those are actually really quite interesting, critical things to get right in the design. Just as much as getting things like how you manage worker placement or area majorities right. The dexterity aspects are very important. It has to be simple enough, and of course, bearing in mind the constraints that some people have on dexterity in the first place, which you have to be very, very conscious of. Getting the level right, the level of dexterity right, is quite a critical aspect of design to make it work. If it's a party game or a family game or a more intellectual type game like Merchants of Amsterdam, getting that right is quite critical.
And I think that definitely, like, these points are, you don't need to internalize them. You just need to know broadly that the more things you have in a set, the more each individual card is going to be worth. But it does start slowing down around the 5 of each thing mark.
Right.
And so, but there's not, as you said, not a lot of dexterity going on here, but it's just enough to give it that frantic party game vibe.
Which
going
is nice.
on,
Good.
and
Yes.
it's like just a really nice thing. Now, let Piratoons and
Right.
the Schiffe
Yes.
für to Loss. Actually, I might scroll up just to see by Olivier Grégoire and Thibaut Quintens.
Okay. Yeah.
Acton Games made this version, and what's going on here is you've got a minute, as you've got at least a minute. So this is kind of like going on, but with more stuff going on, and you're placing your meatballs as a bid, and the person who places the most meeples on one of these planks in the middle of the table is going to win it. If there's a tie, then it's the person with the highest unique bid, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a speed and timed dexterity auction.
Yeah, it's basically a speed auction.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hello, Xate. Lovely to see you, and I hope you're generally well.
Hi.
But so later on, you can see that
because it's pirates, it's got you're getting treasure stuff out of it. That's
you're building your
objective.
ship. You're not
Yes.
even getting treasure. You're getting some cards that go onto the windows and some flags. And at the end of the game, there's a whole bunch of ways that you score. Like, as you can see, like the scoring isn't. So it's not like a complex game, but it's not like going on where you can just explain the whole thing in one single paragraph. There's a whole bunch of stuff. The most sales, the most doubloons, the biggest boat, the most connections, minus for the empty spaces, plus for this set, plus for that set. And so it is a very pretty game, and it definitely feels like, given that once the timer reaches 0, it's up to any player to say stop, and it doesn't stop unless someone says stop, and it's very clear in the rules, and it does say this is a minimum.
Right, that's quite a clever idea. I like that. Yeah, I do like that. I think that mechanism was one of the ones that was used in one of the ones we were looking at in Cambridge. Actually, that idea that you have a kind of time, you have a timer, but that's just a minimum time, and anybody who thinks they finished can then say stop, and that ends it. Which is it's a lovely way of doing it. That works really well for this light, relatively fluffy party game style. Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I mean, reviews kind of suggested that whereas going on, by really pushing hard into the speed elements and giving you literally 10 seconds, I mean, most people aren't going to count slower than 1 second per count. I mean, most people would do it less than 10 seconds, I imagine, if you're counting down from 10 to 0. But if you really lean into that and make the rules as simple as they need to be to match that, then you really differentiate it. Whereas I do worry that I did see this where people are saying, oh, it doesn't really work as a turn-based thing, but at the same time, I kind of feel like I want to have turns, and so it's at the point where it's not making a really strong claim about what it is, which, I mean, I'm just saying this, but we're not here to, I'm getting too much into a critique thing. I've not even played it, so that's completely inappropriate.
Well, with any of this style of game, it has to know its place and has to know how the players will react. You don't want to have, I was going to say, you don't want to have a very, very simple auction dexterity party game which overstays its welcome, because it will get a bit tedious once you've done it a few times. And that's the case with any type of game, especially simple games. It needs to have that pacing needs to be good, and it's a very difficult thing. Well, I know you're an expert at this, Bez, aren't you, in terms of pacing? For party games and family games, pacing is absolutely essential, and it's not something that I'm necessarily the best person to comment on, because I don't normally design those kinds of games. But yeah, having a game which overstays its welcome isn't what you really want.
But also, you want if you're having a speed game, I think it should be fast enough to really feel that way. And going on. Yeah. I mean, if you're taking 10 seconds per auction round and then maybe 30 seconds, even a minute to set up, and resolve the auction. I mean, the nice thing there is that you've got this high frantic thing, then a bit of respite,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
always nice, and it's not going to take more than 7 minutes. And then at the end, you can, yeah, let's play that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And second time around, it'll take you probably like 20 seconds. So it'll take you about 3, 4 minutes to play the whole game, I imagine.
Yeah.
But how, and Saints, I'm sorry that you have a fever, lots of love, and I hope you get better soon. Um, how does a dexterity auction impact a game? I'm going to say that you're mixing together two things that have a really strong presence. And
Yes.
so if you're making a dexterity auction, your game kind of has to be built around
Yes.
this dexterity
Yes.
auction.
I totally agree. It's well, and the examples we've got here are all they all have the dexterity auction as the central pillar of the game, and there is a if it's going to be a very heavily dexterity based game, a more complex dexterity based game, you don't want it to be a complex thinky game as well, because those will appeal to different probably appeal to different audiences. Merchants of Amsterdam gets away with it very nicely because the dexterity element literally is just slapping your hand on a timer. That's not having to aim, lots of pieces at a specific area of a board, which appeals in a different way. It's as I've said before, it's the context that really counts here. So if you've got a dexterity mechanism which is very party game-ish, then you don't really want to have a complex set of mechanisms in addition to it. I mean, on the interestingly, there's a wargaming aspect there. If you've got a war game which has got dexterity aspects to it, like if in our Conference of Wargamers group, we have these games. We have lawn games. You play outside, and you can have lawn games where you're using spring-loaded cannon to shoot at ships, for example. So if you've got that because it's a dexterity thing. So you basically you want to have it very, very simple. So if the little projectile hits a ship, it knocks the ship out, or so no other complicated lookup tables or anything else like that in that style of game, because it's out of place in that. It needs to be the context of a dexterity auction game needs to be simple, straightforward mechanics.
I mean, if you're using the complexity points, I mean, yeah, the dexterity kind of adds one type of complexity and challenge, and the strategy adds another, but it can be done. I want to actually give a shout out to Monstrous by Kim Brevach,
right. Okay.
which I don't know if you played this game. I
have not. No.
So it's sort of a worker placement game, but you need to throw your cards to get them where you want them to be, if you see what I mean.
Right, okay, yes.
And so, as you can see, there's Argos, and it's got a special thing that might just give you 2 victory points, because that's what the 2 symbol there means. And Hydra, if it hits anything else, you put the hit monsters on top of their god's decks. So you take turns, and then you would be taking off the other things. Whereas the Harpy, so you take turns to throw, you throw and then you resolve. So you might throw and then get rid of the other people's things. Throw and then steal things, like if you are the Harpy, or gain faith for hitting a monster or hitting a location if you're the Manticore.
Yeah.
And there's always 2 different sides that you can throw the cards from, and hopefully you can get it on the correct side, but obviously that needs a bit of dexterity.
Yes.
And so I think that dexterity as a source of randomness and chaos, because quite often that chaos is just, well, let's flip over a deck, let's see what goes on there, let's roll some dice. And this is just, hey, ultimately, yeah, sure, you can get better at flicking or at throwing or whatever, but you're never going to have perfect control over it. So you need to kind of adapt, and it leads to big dramatic moments, I think.
Yes, I agree. I think it's the because you've got that physical thing, you're going to get big dramatic moments there. That's well, even in Merchants of Amsterdam, it is that big dramatic moment where nobody's gone for it because the price is too high, and suddenly somebody goes, "Blat, what? You've bid like 50 more than anybody else wanted to," and that is a nice dramatic moment. And it lends itself to that, doesn't it? Dexterity.
And Joseph, I'm glad that it's been inspiring. I mean, getting back to, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Getting back to like what the experience is going to be like, I think it is going to add drama. I think auctions are inherently interactive. It's going to be highly interactive, but I think dexterity auctions, it is kind of a narrow thing because by their nature, you have to have some unclear view, unclear price value to things if it's an auction game. If it's too clear, then it's not
It's too
interesting.
obvious, yes.
So you need to have a non-obvious strategy there, but you also need to have some interesting thing going on with the dexterity. So yeah, I guess it's going to be challenging people's brains in different ways and getting them to almost multitask.
Is there a okay? These are very good questions now. Obviously, I'm wondering, is this an area that could be explored more? And is the reason why we've only got 4 in the list? Is it because designers are reluctant to combine dexterity auctions with other mechanics and other contexts? Because obviously dexterity games per se will only appeal to a certain type of audience, and other types of games will appeal to different or potentially
I mean, for
different
sure.
audiences. Is it? And is there also an impact nowadays that the trouble with dexterity games is that there's going to be some people who can't actually play them because of physical limitations? Do we think that's something which might discourage people from designing dexterity games?
I think you're right. I think
one.
that it is less versatile than a lot of these other mechanisms that we've talked about. I think that a hidden reveal auction, it's just a lot faster. It's going to be a once around auction. It feels more strategic, and people who don't like, well, there's always going to be a bit of guesswork with an auction. That's kind of integral to what it is.
Yes.
That player chaos. But I think that, as you say, you have to have some emotional intelligence to be able to play an auction game, I think. And then with the auction stuff, I mean, I guess the simplest thing would be going, gone's style of set collection. I think that is really nice. It's as simple as it can be, and I'd love to play it someday. But otherwise, you've got a lot of accessibility issues there. I would agree.
Yes, I think so. I think it fits. They fit very well with party games and family games. Maybe it's that end of the spectrum that they can work well with, and they certainly fit, as we've said, they fit with games where you're centering the whole game on the dexterity auction aspect. So in that sense, the fact that we've only got 4 is not particularly versatile. But then again, where it strikes, it can strike gold, can't it? I think the ones we've seen look really fun, and they do look really they're interesting and interesting and fun to play. Although probably not, you probably don't want a long game. It's probably
all
more.
of these games have a center in set collection. I mean,
they do. That's true.
Yeah, going. You just get big sets of countries or item types. With the Piratoons, sorry,
Piratoon, yes.
you're working through all of these kind of majorities and set collections that you might get at the end.
That does make sense. It does make sense because, as we said earlier, if it's an auction dexterity, you don't want to have it surrounded by complication if you can avoid it. Now, Merchants of Amsterdam is probably the example which is exception approved.
Definitely the most complex, but I think it also has the simplest auction.
Yes,
and I think that that's not coincidental. And here obviously it's all about collecting those sets of food. So that, but this has actually got quite a lot going on
It
in there
has.
with the economic system
Mm.
and everything.
Yeah, I'm
And
quite
it did
surprised
make
at
me
how much that's
wonder.
got going on in it, actually. It does look it's quite a lot in there for an auction dexterity game.
The hidden information was a
Mm.
really interesting mechanism that go does seem to work really well, because you're throwing these discs
Yeah.
face down, and so other people aren't sure what you're bidding until they all get flipped over.
Yeah.
And it did make me wonder, could like could you have something where it's all about those actions, and like you're bidding on actions rather than bidding on.
On the bidding on rather than bidding on the foods. And also it's a 45-minute game. It's probably one of the longer.
But
Is
I
it the
mean,
longest
could you
one?
make a
Yes, it's
that
the
if I
longest.
were to,
Yeah.
so when is it good? Who would enjoy it? Do we have anything more to say? I think we've already explored
I
a
think
bit
we
here.
have explored that. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think we're missing one of these in our collection, to be honest. We probably ought to have
and
something.
neither of us
Hmm.
have used it yet.
No, not
Would you
yet.
like to, Alan? Are
Well,
you
I
feeling
have
inspired?
I I kind of would like to, but knowing that Charlie doesn't like auction games, it makes me kind of quite reluctant to go down
Mm-mm-mm.
that route, to be honest. But it would be fun. I would like the challenge of doing that. And it is a challenge to get the dexterity aspects exactly right. So I think having seen other designers not struggling, but doing that work on getting the dexterity bits right. For example, if you're having to throw things into something, is it a cup? Is it a space on a board? If it's a cup, how big is the cup? How
Mm-mm-mm.
difficult does it need to be to get things in the cup? All those kinds of aspects. those are quite tricky, or at least to me they seem quite tricky, because I'm not really
Mm-mm-mm.
attuned to dexterity games. But what about you, Bez?
I am
Because
very.
you have got dexterity games, haven't you? So
I mean, I'm best known for Yogi,
yeah,
which
exactly.
is a big body dexterity game. I mean, there's
Yeah.
very few of those. I definitely subcategorize dexterity games. I know that on Board Game Geek they're all lumped together, but I would definitely consider flicking and stacking as
Mm.
completely different from doing that with your
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
body.
Mm.
But I do definitely think that I would like a sort of throwing um, auction dexterity game. And my first thoughts are I would probably have a small deck of cards where the
Yeah.
cards are the actions that come out every turn. And maybe the cards are, you get a different number of cards based on the number of players. Maybe you've got um, bits of string around, and the string is where you're allowed to put your hand in. I don't know, and so you're not allowed to cross the string. Maybe the string
Yes.
doesn't need to be there. Maybe it's just you're not allowed to go over the table. That would also work.
Are you
But
throwing the cards? Is that the
no, you're
idea?
not throwing
No,
cards.
no, you're not
You're
throwing
throwing
cards. No.
something onto the cards. You're throwing
Oh, I
coins
see.
onto the cards.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
throwing your coins onto the
Yes.
cards,
Right.
and then you're trying to get the most things onto the actions that you want.
Yeah,
That's
that
what I was
sounds good.
thinking.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is, when I saw the video of Hibachi, the gloss and the way that things slide makes such a big difference. And so a lot of the work that goes into it would be of, can we get something that slides? And if it's on a table, is that still going to be good enough? And so maybe can we get something that's smooth enough to slide on any table?
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
happens if then the cards slide around? Because even if you start them off separated, then
Yes.
what if the cards then overlap? So there's a
Well,
lot to
you
ponder.
could you could you could just use cards, because you could have some cards which are face up, which is the actions you're going to win, and you have to claim the actions. You have to throw the cards so that they land face down on the cards you're going to use as actions.
Mm.
You don't actually need coins. You could just have, and then you've got some interesting choices. You could have a hand of cards, and you have to choose something to go down as an action, and the other ones to throw. So
Mm.
that might be interesting. That might be an interesting choice. Yeah,
But
it
still,
could be.
because you want to know, it's always nice when the things that you're throwing are clearly yours, because then when it's on the table, you
Yes.
can remember, oh yeah, that's that person's, that's that
You could have a
person's.
set of cards of your own, couldn't you? I guess.
You could, but
Anyway,
see, we are already
we're
designing
already
it.
designing.
We're clearly
Yes.
excited by this,
Yeah.
and because there are so few games, I think we can both agree that let's have more. And
yes, definitely.
so,
Excellent.
we've talked about quite a bit of stuff, and is there something that you would like to ask me about? Question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
Okay. I think for today, the question of the day is: what is your favorite dexterity game? That's
Ooh.
the one. Doesn't have to be auction dexterity. It's favorite dexterity game, and you don't have to say in a bind, although you could if you wanted to.
I mean, I actually believe that Yogi is better than in a bind just because of the quality of the
Quality of
cards.
the cards, yeah, that's true.
I think that actually makes a functional difference to the game. But I kind of want to say a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your radishes, the black and white edition.
Right.
Because, a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your turnips, or a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots are both fine games, and I'm happy with them, but they were designed to be like good games, which I believe they are. But then there was the super hard version of the radishes where I deliberately made everything ridiculously hard. And so now, rather than the creatures all facing the camera, they're sideways, or they're juggling, or they're on bicycles or stuff.
Yes.
And obviously, if you get the black and white version, then other people can color it in. And at the end of a convention, I try to get it all colored in. And one of those decks, all colored in by different people, which adds even more to the confusion, is my favorite, because I like a challenge, and I like that visual recognition. And so that's what
that's yours. Yes.
And
excellent.
It's like that. Or if you need a challenge, do it with one hand above your head. So that's how I could, play a sort of fair game against someone else. Keep one hand above my head.
Right.
Bit of extra time.
Yes. Right. That's all very well worked. I like it. I mean, my favorite is actually a la carte. I do like a la carte.
With the little
there's a couple of reasons. I just love the central mechanism of seasoning the dishes and getting that. But the other dexterity thing is that they have in it is you can actually cook pancakes, and so you have to actually toss the little cardboard recipe for the pancake and have it land in your pan again, which just I don't know, that just adds something really nice, an extra bit of dexterity, totally different technique, but you got the frying pans, and let's make use of those frying pans to make crepes. And the other thing is that it's by Karl-Heinz Schmiel, who also designed Die Macher. And the fact that one designer designed a la carte and Die Macher, I think, is just brilliant. So, I mean, possibly two ends of the spectrum of types of games. One is a silly party game, really short and fun and colourful and all dexterity, and the other one is a highly mega long serious game about German politics. It's just the same designing two of those is brilliant.
And Yoda wants to give a shout out to Minara that I've just looked up. It looks a little bit like Via Paletti. I've not played Minara myself, but I have played Via Paletti. But this does look really cool, and I'm enjoying just the visuals of how it turns out.
Oh wow, that's Villa Paletti on acid, isn't it?
Oh, it's a co-op.
Oh, is it? Oh, that would make sense. Otherwise, it would never get built that big. Somebody would want to demolish it.
So I will be maybe skimming the rules of that, but I was not familiar with that, and thank you for sharing that, Yoda. Other than that, over to you. What are you up to? You can share what's if you want to. I am going to go to the post office and see if I've got some games, because I should have a package of Creature. which is the
Aha.
French version of a game about two comical creatures and trying to
I
identify their
see.
loves just makes noises. So it's like a lot. I actually worked out the new title is shorter than the old initialization.
Right.
So yeah, there were more words in my title than there were letters in the new one. But I'm going to go. Hopefully, it will be at the post office because I asked them to
hmm
pop it there, but I didn't get a message to confirm. But I'll go there with my ID. I'll make sure to get outside. Yeah, got a whole bunch of tasks to do, but I've not decided. I'll probably work on getting things out to. I'm sending out little Hogmanay presents because it's too late for Christmas presents. I'm sending out little Hogmanay presents
Good idea.
for people who've helped me at conventions to as a hey,
Yay.
here's
Nice idea.
some
Yeah.
of the things that I've done and like little notes on it. So that's
That's
a
great.
thing that I'm going
Mm.
to do. What about you? Kingmaker rules.
Kingmaker rules checking. We're on classic. So there's all the classic components.
How much is left to do,
Checking all
Alan?
well, we've actually got 3 rule books. We've got a rule book for Kingmaker 2, which is the new version, and for Classic and the expansions, and then also for the solo challenge. And we've still got the Classic and options to check, and the final checks to do on all the other ones. So there's still a bit to do. All the other components, the box and the punch boards and the boards, those have all been done, but there's still quite a lot because it's going through a lot of text, which is that's been quite a challenge to get this sorted. So we're nearly there, though. We're nearly there. It's looking really, really nice now. I'm very happy with it. Although, you always do you get to a stage in this game where you just want to get rid of it because it's taking so long? Anyway, yes, I'm at that stage.
Yes.
I am at the stage of thinking, I've checked the rules so many times now. Can we just get to the end? Anyway, yeah, it's fine.
Yes. I mean, for me, I would say that I if I had to, I mean, I quite like the initial ideation process, and I really like the big sweeping changes bits in the middle,
Yeah.
and I quite like the content creation where if I'm making substantially different content, like different cards, working out the cards for Yogi or the
Yeah.
creatures or
Yeah.
stuff that's gameplay meaningful, but then once it's 90% done and it's, I mean, I think that it's about the fatigue. If I'm brought on as a developer for someone else's project, I don't think I mind it as much. But I actually quite relish the chance to say, well, this is something that's working. How can I make it even better? How can I refine it a tiny bit? Like, I mean, Matthew Dunstan and Brett Gilbert, I keep saying they're brilliant designers, but even there with Chocolate Factory, I was able to make a small change to a couple of cards that, it's not that it's just because it's a fresh set of eyes. And having another thought process going on to it, it's like, but if you've got that number with all these cards, with that particular combination, this could be problematic. But if we increase that by 1, then it will be okay.
Yes.
And doubling and tripling anything is always a dangerous thing to have in a game and can easily be undercosted. But yes, if you've been there from the start to the end, yes, absolutely, 100%, I do get a bit of fatigue. And it doesn't quite come back as a joyful thing until it's then out in the wild and then I see everyone playing it. And that's then where it becomes an absolute joy because I could demonstrate something literally thousands of times for sure. Yeah, I'm sure there are some things that I've demonstrated thousands of times, but it's every time it's like a new person and you can see the joy in their eyes, you can see what's going on, and that's just an absolute delight.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that, but as a publisher as well as a designer, it is those the nitty gritty aspect which do get.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing some short games again. Actually, I have to say that'd be nice, rather than the mega Kingmaker. But anyway, it's been a good journey.
Recap and wrap up before we finish up. To recap and wrap up, this is firstly, we looked at. Oh, can you share your screen again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
We had a quick look at Last Bug Standing. We had a bit of chats about what's going on with the AI. And yeah, there talks about the pulpy arts. Don't worry about it if you can't get to top. We talked about all the different games, all 4 of them. That's our dexterity auctions. And dexterity auction does not just mean an auction and dexterity, it means the 2 are integrated. And that can be done with speed, with slamming your hand for a Dutch auction. It can be done with flipping tiles onto the proper spaces. Maybe those coins or whatever that you're throwing have different values on them. It can be done with popping things into little plastic cups at speed. Or it can, this is pretty much the same mechanism as going on, except it's a bit less speed and a bit more, slightly more involved point scoring. And it was lovely to see all those things. And there is the gunner again. And yeah, we had chats about Kingmaker, which is going to be worked on today. We chatted about, post office and sending stuff. And that's it. If you want to check me out, I am, of course, Stuff by Bez. You can check out future streams there. Tomorrow, I am chatting to Kirsten Lunde, the winner of the LDEC Design Contest, and we're going to talk about that experience. And Friday, I'll be doing a super quick thing as I go to National Theatre even.
Yeah.
But if you want to check out Alan Paull, Alan, where do you like to be found?
On email, alan@surprisetogames.co.uk. I'm Benthamfish on Twitter. Oh, we're still doing Twitter, aren't we? Are we? I guess we are.
Yeah.
And I am Benthamfish on elsewhere. I'm Alan Paull on Board Game Geek. And yeah, best if you want to get hold of me, alan@alanpaul.co.uk or alan@surprisetogames.co.uk. It's the best way to get hold of me.
So, to everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, has this been interesting? Would you like to see more dexterity auction games? Do you feel inspired to make a dexterity auction game? Let me know, because I am curious. And please do share, spread the word. Thank you very much, everyone, for just being part of this conversation. Most importantly, thank you very much, Alan Paull.
And thank you, Bears. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And at this point, as always, I want to say bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Joseph. Bye-bye, everyone else. Bye-bye, Alan.
Bye. Bye-bye, Bears.